Welcome to the Heartbeat Podcast with your host, Mike Sommer, where CIOs get what they won't hear anywhere else. Candid insights, real strategies, and the truth about leading tech in a world that's changing faster than ever.
Today's guest doesn't just know about digital transformation, he accelerates it. Ian Gotts is the founder of Elements.Cloud, a change intelligence platform revolutionizing how enterprises manage and scale Salesforce with confidence. A serial entrepreneur, tech advisor, Forbes Technology Council member, and author of over 10 books, Ian brings a rare mix of strategic vision and operational depth. Whether he's writing, speaking, or flying between continents, Ian is known for helping CIOs and consulting leaders eliminate friction, accelerate delivery, and reduce risk when evolving complex Salesforce orgs. In this episode, we're going to unpack why change intelligence is becoming a non-negotiable for Salesforce-driven organizations and how market tech leaders can rethink org management to unlock faster, safer innovation. So if Salesforce is part of your tech stack, you won't want to miss this conversation. Ian, thank you so much for joining Heartbeat, and we are so happy to have you on as a guest.
Thank you for the invitation.
So I read in one of your articles recently how you really saw Salesforce as a doctor sees a patient. Can you walk us through this thinking? Because I thought it was such an appropriate way of diagnosing and using an analogy from the 1900s, and would love for you to share that with our audience.
Yeah. So if you think about Salesforce, part of its power is you can configure it very easily, but quite quickly you get that level of configuration on top of other bits of configuration, and you end up with technical debt. And almost either the consultant or, let's say, an admin or product owner comes in and says, okay, what state are you in? Almost let's do a health check. And in the 1900s, a doctor would come in and they would say, if you had a problem, they'd squeeze your leg or taste your urine or all those weird things they did to work out whether you were ill or not. Nowadays, you go into a doctor's surgery, and if they don't have an X-ray scanner, if they don't have an automatic blood monitoring and blood pressure testing, you find another doctor. And it feels like from the Salesforce world, we haven't really got ubiquitous tooling to do all of this org health check. And that's really the gap we're trying to fill. We are the MRI scanner, the X-ray scanner, the blood test, the blood pressure sensor, all wrapped into one for Salesforce and for other systems.
So maybe you can just walk us back. What was the genesis of Elements, and what was the aha moment you had where you decided to go ahead and start it? And what are some of the paths that you're seeing as some of the big challenges that you're facing and solving today?
So I'm going to take you back before the days of Elements. So the three founders, Richard, Adrian, and I, founded a company called Nimbus, which was a process mapping tool for highly regulated organizations. So if you're highly regulated, you need to demonstrate to the regulators you're following due process. So we ended up selling that to, Fortune companies who need to document how they worked. And we built that very effectively, global company. It then was acquired. We retired. And then I got the band back together again. I got them out of retirement and said, what should we do? And we said, we only know how to do one thing. Let's do that all over again. But we'd also been Salesforce customers from the very earliest days. So we'd been a Salesforce customer from when there were only two people in their London office. And obviously at that time, they didn't have any big clients, so they weren't really interesting from a marketplace. Roll the clock forward to when we started Elements. Suddenly Salesforce had big clients with big problems. And we said, great, let's build the same idea, build a process mapping tool, make sure it's available to any platform, but let's make Salesforce the first go-to-market, which is where we started. We started rolling out the process mapping capability. People loved it, but they kept on saying two things. One is, I'm assuming these diagrams can build themselves. And we're like, no, how would that work? And the second thing they said was, it's great, but why can't you tell us what we built? Could you not build a metadata dictionary to explain what we've configured? So we almost ended up on a twin track where we were continually evolving the process mapping, but we also then built out this metadata dictionary, but not just all the metadata, but all the dependencies. So the question that customers were asking was, if I make a change to this field, that pick list value, that flow, that apex, what else is impacted? So that's really been the last 9 years journey, which is how do we bring the greatest intelligence about how your org works so you can make better decisions, better change decisions. So to finish the story off, in the last couple of months, those two things have come together. Now we can take a view of all of the metadata, the configuration, and then automatically draw the process diagrams based on the question you ask. Tell me how the sales opportunity works. It will look at hundreds of thousands of metadata items, flows, objects, fields, pick list values, I don't know, record types, apex, permissions, profiles, and build out a process diagram. So that question we got asked 9 years ago was like, why can't you build it? The answer is now we can. And one final thing, which I thought was quite funny, I was looking back at some blogs, and on April the 1st in 2021, I wrote this spoof blog about how we launched this product called Magnum that will automatically draw all the process diagrams. That's what we've just built. So it's taken 9 years as our sort of North Star. 4 years ago, we wrote a spoof blog about how this thing might work. We've now delivered it. And I think that's really why suddenly things have taken off.
Now, within the Salesforce world, I find that there's typically two audiences that we have to speak to. There's the IT audience, and then there's the business audience. By having something that is easily translatable, something that is easily understood on a single sheet of paper, how has that changed the dynamic of conversation amongst those two groups?
I think you're right. Often it's the business is the owner of Salesforce, and sometimes IT is the delivery of capability of changes. I'm seeing that changing. I'm seeing for very large organizations, Salesforce is now often being owned by by IT, and it's almost flipped around. Right now, the business are the customers of IT. And unless there's a common way of actually describing what you want, we have this big disconnect where the business thought they described what they want. It was textual. IT went and built it. That actually wasn't what was required. The business gets hacked off because I told you, why don't you understand? So I think trying to get this common language, and the process diagrams help do that. If I give you a bit of data, we analyze about 50,000 orgs a month, about 1.5 billion metadata items. So some good data there. 50% of all custom objects never get used. Yeah, exactly. 50%. That's not counting managed packages. These are ones which people have argued over whether they wanted it, written emails, Slack messages, argued over what it was going to be called. Obviously, they didn't document it, but then they deployed it, and then it was never used. If I look at the number of fields, it's 41% of all custom fields never get populated, rising to 80% for some of the more common objects. So that's a massive cost and also just wasted money, but also wasted time building things that aren't required. If we can eliminate that, or at least get closer to eliminating a lot of that, suddenly IT is delivering what the business need, and we can accelerate. And I think agents are forcing people to take a hard look at actually how they go through that cycle, because you can't get away with poorly specified agents and expect them to be reliable.
Absolutely. You and I had a conversation some days ago regarding some of the biggest problems that is really holding Salesforce back. And I would like to go into those and expand a little bit. The first is fragmented data and siloed systems. How big of a problem is this? And what are the approaches that you're seeing on how companies are looking to solve for this?
Okay, so I don't think fragmented data is just a Salesforce issue. I think every single company you go into, you've got fragmented data. You have poor data quality because systems haven't been specified particularly well. I think we got away with that. The whole big push to agents is forcing people to go, okay, we need good quality data. We always have, but humans are pretty good at going, that number's not quite right, or that data's not quite right. I need to go and check it. Agents haven't got that level of, they do things literally. So therefore, that's the real push for getting cleaner data, or at least more consistent data. I think Data Cloud from the Salesforce on the Salesforce platform is a huge step forward in terms of trying to aggregate and get almost a single version of data. So that's obviously helping. If you're in a big enterprise, then there are other data platforms where you're aggregating data. The difficulty is there's just so much data there. And I think, again, you asked me for some ideas. One is, let's get focused on some areas. So if you're going to implement an internally facing agent to support your customer success teams around case, let's just focus on that. And the first thing, let's not try and fix the data quality to start with. Let's first of all work out what the data governance is. Let's work out how data gets created, how it flows through. The analogy I always give, there's no point draining the pond, cleaning it up, and still having polluted rivers running in, and even having some underground streams you never knew about. So I think this idea we talked about configuration mining, making it very visible about the way that data flows from getting created all the way through to and being used and then maybe deleted. That's the starting point, which is we need some visibility and agreement on what that is. Then we can start to fix it. Again, narrow the scope. So we're not trying to fix absolutely everything. Let's try and fix an area where we've got a strong business case, we've got a sponsor, maybe an agent is going to be using it, and therefore there's a strong driver there.
With the implications on bad data, data governance not really being a focus for most companies, do you believe that the CIOs and executive leadership are currently understanding the true cost of not getting this cleaned up or connected correctly?
I think everyone realizes there is a cost, but I think it's about prioritization. Yeah, we'd all like to fix everything. We like to have better documented metadata. We'd like to have better documented processes. I think it's about prioritization, and we're seeing an acceleration of business transformation. Agents are forcing people to take a hard look at the quality of the data. And I think what's happened is it's just been reprioritized. So we've always known it's been a cost. Now we're seeing the true cost, which is if you can't implement agents in particular areas, or you can't streamline the business, there's a competitive advantage issue there. And therefore, I think that also ramps up the potential losses there.
Do you have a story you can share with us where a company had some challenges with regarding to the fragmented data and siloed systems and what changes they put in place and what outcomes they received? Do you have any on the top of your mind?
Let's think about ourselves. We have multiple systems inside Elements. Clearly, Salesforce is the core, but we have the Chabo, which is our academy learning system, so customers could also log in there. So they have a different login. We have our HubSpot, where all our marketing data is, get different logins there. People attend webinars, they download ebooks. What else have we got data? We've got something called Gainsight, collects data on how our application's being used. So I've already listed 4 or 5 systems that ideally should just have there's one email address, but it's never like that. So we use Data Cloud to aggregate all of that. So we got a single view of the customer. And what's the outcome? The outcome, hopefully, if you're on the receiving end of our emails, you don't read it and go, why did you send me that? It's like, you attended a webinar. I can see that you've done a training on the academy, but I can see you're not using that functionality. So there must be a question why. So we can start sending more targeted emails because we're now aggregating the data from 3 or 4 different systems centered around the email address, your identity. And then that should mean that we're sending more targeted emails, which feel like they're helpful rather than it's just get more junk.
I think that is so key. And I think it's that personalization of if someone's stuck in the use of the product, and if you can talk to them knowing where the challenges that they're facing, it's going to not only help them with the answer, but it's going to build that level of trust versus if they're starting to use the product and they keep getting marketing emails that talk about, you should sign up for this free trial or you should sign up for this new feature. They've already bought in. So you actually start to almost take away from that buy-in and the level of trust of that customer. And so by having that synchronized data and having the right information presented at the right time is critical going forward. So
besides to that though, which is you've got I see you've done all the training, but you're not using the functionality. The flip side is also, I see you're using the functionality and you're raising cases all the time, but there's training available, which we could direct you to, which you didn't know existed. So therefore we can reduce our support costs and reduce the frustration that you're probably because you go, I don't understand how to use this thing. I keep raising cases. So it's that once you've got that data, you can come at it from lots of different perspectives, and both we gain obviously, but also the customer gains.
Well, absolutely. And I think having that level of awareness is ultimately where we want to get to. The customers want to feel like they're being heard, they're being understood. And that is the truest sense, that if you can get them in that pain point and either redirect them to a place where, the content, the training, whatever is needed is provided to them, or if it's something that requires a bit more hand-holding because you've deflected some of the lower level, very high time occupying activities, your team can then be freed up to do the stuff that requires more of the human interaction. So I think that's a very well put approach. The second topic we discussed, and I think is a critical challenge that companies are facing, is where things have been over-engineered, where there's outdated architecture. Specifically, if a company has started with Salesforce and over time, they have just simply added to that technical debt, they have increased from the original vision of the opportunity, And now it's a bit of a dumpster fire. It's a bit of a disaster. And the analogy I've always used is imagine that you started off by designing a single family home with one bedroom, one bathroom, and you put the plumbing and the electrical to support that. But then as soon as you started using it, your neighbors, your friends, your family started moving in, and that one bedroom apartment ended up becoming a 15-story monstrosity. But the plumbing and the electrical was never designed to handle anything more than one bedroom. Can you walk us through why you believe so many businesses have really, I don't want to say pushed away, but they haven't really dealt with that bloat of Salesforce, and it has to get to a breaking point for things to be addressed? Is there something that you have come to experience in your years of doing this, of why things keep getting pushed off until it becomes critical?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing we're seeing is that it's around the 7-year mark where someone says, maybe we should throw this away and start again. That That's just, it feels like that. Now that just must be wrong. You think about the level of investment thrown away if you say you're going to re-implement at the 7-year mark. And I think that's when the conversation starts. Sometimes people do re-implement, sometimes they just fix it. That's one point. I think the second thing is, it's not necessarily fair to lay all of the technical debt at the feet of the company. If you think about it, Salesforce is a platform where it's constantly evolving. So Flow has replaced Process Builder Workflow. Flow is becoming more and more capable and is capable. You can probably replace some of the Apex you've got with Flow. There's been a big push. Cheryl Feldman's done an amazing job really pushing to get a better security architecture around permissions profiles and permission sets. So there are things that are coming through with Salesforce that are causing you to have technical debt. So that's one thing. Clearly, people have been building. The benefit of Salesforce is I can build things quickly. It's made it very easy for people to say to someone junior, I need another field, I need a flow, go and do that. And it's been very difficult for people to push back, often because the people who've been brought in to manage and administer Salesforce have been fairly junior, and they've never had the tools to push back. And there really, up until probably 3 years ago, there really wasn't any business analysis training offered by Salesforce, which is the critical piece that's missed. The bit at the front that says, I know you want a field, but talk to me about how you want the business process to change and how that's going to be better. It may not be a field. It may be a record type. It may be a field. I don't know. But the skills to be able to go and ask the questions before you start building haven't been asked. We're seeing a lot more business analysis coming through now. There's a business analysis certification. There are a lot of trailhead badges. We contributed quite a lot of content to those. We saw a huge number of issues was because there wasn't enough analysis done up front. You've heard of the term shift left. The earlier you pick up problems, the less costs they have. So if you leave it until it's already in production, there's a huge cost to pull it back out. So I am seeing a shift. I am seeing as organizations are becoming larger and Salesforce is now maybe moving into the IT department, being owned by IT, they've already got a number of those disciplines in place and they're looking at it and going, okay, let's put a more rigorous implementation life cycle in place. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but there are a huge number of organizations that have grown from a solo admin doing the best that they could, basically being ordered around and being an order taker. And that's where we've ended up with a lot of that technical debt. And it takes quite a lot to put that on pause to re-architect. And it takes quite a big transition. It could be the merger of two orgs that might be the transition, the catalyst that forces you to rethink the architecture. It may be agents, or it may be just, we're going to start again.
And I think it's also so critical that when the IT or the team that is building on Salesforce and working on behalf of business can come back based on facts and not emotion. And what I mean by that is if someone from business says, hey, I need this field or I need you to make this change, it's not going to affect anything, just go ahead and do it. If a business analyst or someone doing the work comes back and says, well, let me understand why and let me understand what you're trying to achieve, it can sometimes be frustrating for the business if they don't have anything to be basing their, I don't call it pushback, but why can't you just go ahead and do this? That you used to be able to do this all the time. And I think when you can present some factual information and say, this is what it looks like today, and you're asking me to make these changes, and I'm totally happy to do, but this is what it's going to impact, and these are the other things it's going to affect. I think it changes the conversation from just go ahead and do it to a real discussion of who else is going to be involved and what is going to be best for the company. So it moves it out from an individual, I desire state to more of a business. How does this best serve us as an organization? And that leads me to what I make is point number 3, which is the lack of governance and process controls. And that is something that I find a lot of companies avoid almost at all costs, which is talking about governance. And I would love your opinion on where you see it fitting in, and if you believe it's an accelerator to value or if it's something that slows things down.
I think process and governance accelerates time to the speed of transformation. And people look at me going, it's funny, processes are binary. People either get them or they don't get them. But you either see process as if we can quickly understand how things are meant to work, we understand how we can transition quickly. But for those people who have never been involved in process or who don't believe it works, who never want to be driven by process, they're like, oh no, you're just using that to stop me doing what I want to do. I've definitely seen that it feels like you're making very quick progress if there isn't a process and there's no governance. It feels like you're actually we're getting stuff done. But ultimately, by the time you've got it wrong and then they've had to redo it, the ultimate time to deployment and adoption is longer. And I think that's the trick that we have to play, which was we need to find a few examples for the naysayers going, fine, I don't need to do this, just build it. Find some small examples where we do go through a rigorous process and we get to the right answer more quickly with less cost. And I want to pick up on one of the previous point, which was if the business goes, hang on, it can't be that hard just to go make that change. If you've got the dependency tree, this is, by the way, do you realize that this value kicks off 7 flows and those 7 flows kick off those 4 flows and that kicks off some apex. And if you can demonstrate that, someone go, we need to look at this properly. That's why this thing will actually take some while to do. But that change you want there, which felt really complicated, I can see that's actually relatively quick to do. So it doesn't mean that everything has to take a long time. If you've got some decent data, you can fast forward some of those changes because you know that they are low risk and you can make the changes fairly quickly. At the moment, you have to assume everything's an unexploded bomb and it's going to take you 3, 4, 5 weeks to do the analysis. With decent data, a change intelligence platform, you can get to that fairly quickly. I'm staggered. I present at conferences all the time and I always ask, who here's got a metadata dictionary? Like a view of all your metadata with some dependencies. It's less than 5%. Less than 5%. And that has to be the starting point. I stupidly go, okay, who's got an opportunity object? And everyone puts their hand up. I go, yeah. But I'm assuming you're using the opportunity object to track a sale. Yes. And I'm assuming, therefore, you've got your accounts in a spreadsheet. And then for every account, there's a tab. And then all the contacts are in the spreadsheet. And then you've got your forecasts are all in a Lucid chart. And no, it's all in the same place. Okay. Why is your documentation strategy all these different things? Why don't you have one single source of this is all the metadata, these are the dependencies linked to, here are all the processes, here are all the changes we've made. That's what we need to. That's really what governance is. If you have that, a lot of that can be done in an automated way. For Elements, we pull all that together. That shouldn't slow you down. That's not a massive manual effort. We sync the org every night and build all this rich data for you. That enables you to put some governance around it without a massive overhead. Clearly, governance isn't just that. There are some other things in place. But we're seeing more and more organizations looking at, should we have a center of excellence? And if they're having that conversation, then they're thinking about governance.
It reminds me of a client opportunity I was working on where we had a governance meeting where you had the heads of the different business units and they came to the table with their list of desired business and user stories that they were looking to achieve. And everyone went around the table assuming and making an estimation on the amount of effort it would require. And it was amazing. There was a lot of trade-offs that were being done between the different teams, but it was being based on absolutely no facts.
Yes.
No one had any understanding of, okay, if I want to make these changes, it might sound really easy, but that little change may, as you just said, affect 15 other knock-on effects that it could actually completely disconnect and ruin everything we've done. But this thing that sounds really complicated could actually be done very easily if we had something up on the board, or if there was an asset we could go through and in real time click on and say, here's what it looks like, and here's what we believe are the potential implications. The architecture team could come in and get this sign off. I think if companies were to implement something like that, the amount of speed and just the aha moments of collaboration and the value that governance would bring would be enhanced and heightened so much, because it's never been there. And it just baffles me that I was hoping to lead these conversations and we were literally doing it blind.
But the same is true for consulting firms. The fact that consulting firms are going into clients and writing a statement of work and estimates with no real understanding about what they're getting into. Back to your house analogy, it's like having an architect come in and say, and a builder and go, I'd like to renovate the kitchen. And they stand at the end of the drive and go, yeah, that'll be about, I don't know, $35,000. Do you want to come in and have a look? No, it's a house. It's a house. But don't you want to see the state of our wiring and what the plumbing looks like? That's essentially what consultants are doing at the moment, unless they've got decent data. And that means that they spend the first 3 or 4 weeks on discovery. And then they end up with that difficult conversation with the client going, oh, this is actually a lot more complicated than I first thought. I said it was going to take $35,000. It's more like $50,000. That I understand that if there is no tooling available, but there is. Elements and other companies now provide that to consultants and to clients. So it's almost like, back at the very beginning of the conversation, you're a doctor there going, I know a stethoscope is easily affordable. But no, but I don't use one of those. I'm normally pretty okay without it. You wouldn't even talk to a doctor like that. And I think suddenly consulting firms are going, unless we actually put some decent tooling in that our consultants can use consistently, we are at a disadvantage compared with those organizations, those consulting firms that have got the right tooling. I'm seeing that shift happening relatively quickly now.
So I like to go on this path of the consulting industry, and that's where my background has been for the past essentially 20 years. I feel like there's some significant shifts happening in the market right now where the comprehensive nature of what AI and the different tools that are available to us right now are producing sometimes better outputs than MBAs out of college are able to produce, and the amount of hours and effort required. And I feel like the entire industry is going to be disrupted in probably the biggest way I've ever seen, because sometimes now the brightest minds are no longer holding that advantage of you need to hire them to access the information. And I'm thinking everything from the McKinseys and Bains to the IBMs, Accentures of the world. What do you see potentially happening when it comes to consulting to Salesforce or to clients who have Salesforce? What do you see if you could have a crystal ball? Where do you think things are going?
I think the first thing is AI punishes mediocrity. If you're not very good, then AI will do a better job than you. The first thing I'm seeing is you need to have some level of specialization. You can't just say, I know Salesforce. That's like saying, I know the internet. What does that mean? You may be a specialist in a field service for oil and gas. So it's playing to the more traditional management consultants who are able to bring a level of expertise because they've seen other clients, they understand an industry, or they understand the discipline. The understanding about how the technology works is still required, but not to the same level of detail necessarily. We're already seeing AI applications that can do quite a lot of the admin work. So configure record types or create objects, create fields. So some of that work is being automated. So again, we're moving up the food chain where it's about more strategic advice, more industry advice. The soft skills are going to be even really important. The ability to engage the client and actually navigate the client politics about, okay, you've got conflicting requirements here. What do you really want done? How can I advise you? How can we start to scope it? The project management skills are going to be really important. There's a lot of the softer skills, a lot of the more management consultant skills that I think are going to be the most important rather than the detailed technical skills. Some of those will still be required, but less of those. That's the first thing. Second thing is clients have now the tools to go to be a lot more savvy about what's actually happening. We'll go back to our doctor's analogy. Now a doctor sees you as a patient and you go, okay, I've already My watch has already told me I've got these problems. I've done my own research on the internet. So the doctor's almost on the back foot going, okay, how can I help you? What do you really want me to do? So we're seeing that shift as well, where clients have got better data, better understanding about what they need to do. So a consultant coming in and going, oh, I don't know, 35,000 and we'll do a 3 or 4 weeks worth of discovery and work out what it really costs you. Clients going, there are applications that will already tell you what's the scope of work. So the clients that are going to hold the consultants to a higher standard as well.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think there's two extremes. I think there's the clients that still want to hire those firms and they want it all done for them. And they will hire a team of very bright minds to come in and think through things that they have not seen before. It might be industry specialization, or it might be deep understanding in ways that they just don't have, or they may not trust AI yet to do. And then I think on the other extreme, you have those who want to do everything in-house. And I think there's that third place, which I call a done with you model. And I feel like the advantage and opportunity for the consulting industry as a whole is the pattern recognition of, I've done this for 15 clients. I can see where the landmines are ahead of time. I can see that if you make these decisions today, or if you don't put in these tools, if you don't address technical debt, if you don't address governance, these are the challenges that you're going to run into. And then leveraging AI, leveraging the different back end to support the guidance that you're providing. But I think that human touch, that face-to-face empathy of understanding the pain that will be caused if certain decisions are made is really how the two will work very well together. I think that is a great advantage for those who have done a lot of cycles and a lot of client engagements where they are able to recognize that. What do you think CIOs can do when they're looking to bring on junior teams who may not have that understanding, both internally and even in bringing in partners? How can they bring people up to speed in the fastest possible way so that the level of mediocrity is reduced and you can get to that nice tier of you're getting really good value and output given the tooling that's available?
Oh, that's quite a big question. I think the first process that most customers should put in place is their implementation process. I see that in most organizations that it isn't very rigorous. There's not sufficient business analysis up front. There's no governance around it. There are so many people still using change sets for DevOps. There's no one using, very few metadata dictionaries out there. So people haven't got decent access to the change intelligence data. So fixing that, I think, is the first thing a CIO should be doing. That means that then when they're bringing junior people on, they bring them into an environment where they're working from like solid data rather than bringing junior people on and going, throw you in there, swim around, see what you can find. So bringing them into what is a well understood process, which is well structured and is working well. Maybe it's got some quite good metrics to understand how to improve it. I'm not seeing very much of that. Those organizations who've got a center of excellence in place, saw some data the other day, 91% of those who have a center of excellence in place are the top performers in terms of delivering value from Salesforce. So there's a clear correlation between the two. Good center of excellence, good governance means that you're more likely to deliver Salesforce better. So I think that's where you start. Junior people can thrive if you've got some good structure around them and good people around them. I'll give you an example. Elements, we're building agents internally for ourselves. We've got one big agent, it's about 16, 17 topics, but we're also bring clients are going, hang on, if you could do that, could you help us fix some of the agents that aren't quite working the way we expected? We're being brought in there. The person who's doing that work has been building agents his entire career. Elliot, he graduated 5 months ago.
Wow.
Okay. But this process-led approach, which he grew up with because he came into an organization, he helped create it. He understands how to build agents using these sort of Lego bricks building blocks. He's building agents that work reliably and getting them deployed really quickly. But we put him into a structure with support around him. So the CIO who's coaching him, but he's working with some very senior clients, delivering some amazing work. So I think if the right mechanisms are in place, you get the right structures in place, young people thrive. Came into Accenture a couple of years after graduating. I was given huge responsibility very quickly. I was an engineer by training. So I worked for British Railways, for the railroad company. 6 months after university, I was in charge of 110 guys on the shop floor. I grew up really quickly, but I had a depot engineer and an assistant depot engineer said, we won't let you drown. You'll flounder at times, but we'll coach you and you'll get through this. And that's, I think, is the approach we need. Give some structure and then make sure you put the right people in place. And I think remote working hasn't helped. Our in-office teams are outperforming the remote teams. I'm sure people on the podcast won't like to hear that, but if you have more junior people coming in, you need them to be around the more senior people where they're growing by osmosis. It happens so much slower when it's being done remotely.
I could not agree with you more. And when you have those, whether it's a coffee talk or sitting, having lunch together, it's the conversations that happen outside of the formal setting that really enable that next step. And you said something which is really, I think, insightful, which is Elliot being able to come in and already have the thinking around the process-driven approaches. And I would imagine that because you had given him a source of truth that was living and it was breathing and it was dynamic, changing in real time, whatever adjustments need to be made to be based off of a solid foundation. And I think if that is missing, or if you don't have that source of the fundamentals in place or awareness and really how the company is being run and structured and how decisions are being made, if that is lacking, it's sometimes hard to trust junior teams to really go ahead and to achieve what they have as a potential. Versus if you had those pieces, there's a lot more leniency I think you can give for creative because you have the guardrails in place that even if they went off and did something that was maybe not thought of by those who have been there for a while, it's never really going to break anything. Whereas I think if you have new teams coming on with new ideas, it can be really scary because you don't know where your outliers or where your framework is. And if something goes awry, it can actually really break something versus if you had it documented in such a way that you can go back and whether you could revert back to it or you could do some analysis to just double check before launching it live, it would just build that level of trust. And it would also create a sense of innovation where you are creating a place for people to try new ideas. Can you speak to the importance of documentation inside of a company that is not static and put on a shelf, but when it is implemented and it is living and breathing on a system that is changing all the time, how that enables a company for success?
Yeah, I think you don't have to document absolutely everything. Okay. But I think the important thing is what areas do need to be documented. I don't want you to be innovative about the way you fill out your expenses. I don't want you to be innovative about the process for signing an NDA or the form that we use for, submitting a change request. But I want you to be innovative around the things where you can be innovative. So I think people see documentation as, oh, we have to document absolutely everything. No, we don't. There are certain things where if we have this well understood, it works really well. And that's not where creativity is. If there's it's easily understood about how I raise a change request because something needs to be fixed for a customer. Great. I don't need to make up the form. I don't need to make up the process. I can follow that. I can then use my energy to be creative about working with the customer, supporting. One is it makes it easier for the organization to work. It makes it easier for other people to pick that up because they know where they fit in the process. But for the person doing it, they have a lot more confidence that they're doing the right thing and they can actually just get on and do it. There's nothing worse than doing something and going, I wonder if I'm doing the right thing and whether it's all going to have to be undone or I'm going to get myself into some sort of trouble. That's the power of a process. And our processes can actually help you be more innovative. And as you said, if it's written down and there's a way of, I can suggest changes, we can then revise it, and there's a reasonably easy change cycle, we can innovate off the back of that. So rather than innovating from ground zero every single time, we're innovating. I think Toyota said everybody's job is to improve what they do by 1% every day. It's that continuous improvement, lots of little changes that make a huge difference by the end.
And I think something else that Toyota did that was really a fundamental shift in the marketplace is they gave everyone the authority that if they saw something that could go wrong, they were given the authority and they were encouraged to hit the stop production. And I think that when you have those fundamentals in place, when you have clarity and understanding, it gives the confidence that the employees are empowered to make those decisions. Because I think everyone who's working for the business fundamentally wants to do the right thing. They fundamentally want to make recommendations and empower the business and make adjustments to the business so that everyone thrives. But I feel like there's such a fear of what could potentially go wrong that no one really makes those changes. And I feel like a lot of companies are leaving a significant amount of money on the table because no one's given that authority. And so I'm curious from your point of view, where do you see the most amount of innovation happening in the marketplace? Is it the SMBs, the mid-market enterprise? Who's really pushing the edge as far as changing the way they do things?
Okay, so I think the natural answer would be small companies are more innovative. I'm not sure that's necessarily true. I'm sure that they set out with something innovative in mind, but I don't think they necessarily have the resources to be able to deliver it on the scale that you need to. I'm seeing that large organizations, let's think about how agents, because that obviously is the thing that's driving the biggest change for organizations at the moment. Larger organizations are actually in a better position to innovate around agents. First of all, they have the resources that they can devote to it. Secondly, they have a lot of the fundamentals in place because they've been able to run themselves well. So they've got well-documented processes. They've got good data governance because they've had to have it. They've actually got well-understood metadata because they've got a good implementation lifecycle. I think you will find examples of very well companies of every size. But if you're a startup like on the CDP, just never quite getting it there, always, and it's like everything is last minute, you're never going to have the structures in place to be able to drive a business. We're not a big company, but we actually have got. So I always like to say we're a large company, we just don't have very many people. We've got a lot of those structures in place, which may feel like it actually is a bigger company than it really is because we've got in the right places, we've got the fundamentals right. And give you an example. We built an agent for the sales team to be able to coach themselves based on calls, transcripts from customers. Takes a transcript of a customer, analyzes it, rates them how well they did on 5 different categories. They can then use that transcript to do some role play based on any one of those 5 different areas. That agent took 5 days to build? Huge resource. You couldn't have done it without the capability of AI. There's one example of where, because we had good data, because we understood the processes, we were able to innovate relatively quickly. Something else, which was, we built an agent for everyone to be able to access expenses policies. Okay. It went from 0 to implemented in 37 minutes. Okay. We've already we've got policies well documented. We understood what the process was. We have good agent building skills now, relatively quick to put together, hugely valuable. You're a new employee. Then you've got to go and ask someone about expenses policies and embarrassing questions that you feel you ought to know or you don't know who to ask. Just go to the agent and go and ask. We know that the expenses policies are up to date. So there's some very quick wins you can get. And I think that's why larger organizations, I think, are thriving as we're going through this innovation. The last really big innovation point was COVID. You think about what COVID forced people to do. Best Buy revenue climbed, I think, 240% because they were able very quickly to have curbside delivery. Walmart, again, very quick to come up with home to go and do these things relatively quickly. Not everyone does, but those who are well organized, managed, will do very well when there's a big transformation coming through.
Oh, thank you. I think we've got a storm coming through, so the internet's a bit spotty right now. So I just have maybe 1 or 2 more questions for you. You've been very active on LinkedIn. You're traveling. You're posting a lot. For a CIO that wants to maybe raise their awareness, they want to showcase some thought leadership. What are some lessons that you have learned on what has been helpful to gain traction? Is LinkedIn where you're finding most of your success when talking to your audience? Do you find other platforms are helpful? What would you say to a CIO?
Okay, so the first thing is, what is it actually you want to talk about? I've got a few, I don't talk about a huge range of topics, but the things I've done, I've got years of experience. And therefore, what I'm writing about is not to sell anything. It's actually, I'm driven by trying to educate. The reason I'm sitting on this call, I've no idea, it won't drive any sales necessarily. It's a great conversation, but hopefully people will be listening to this and there'll be some aha moments. They'll go, oh, I could really use that. That's useful. So first of all, I've come from a place of how can I educate people? And that's why I think the level of traction is people go, the stuff I read from you makes me sit and think, and it's taken me forward. If I have a chance to, people go, I saw you were presenting at an event near me. I wanted to come and see you. So I wanted to hear you present and I wanted to talk to you. So I think it's the combination of the two things, which is, writing, thinking, and very practical. There's not a lot of theory. The conversations we've had have been rooted in this stuff works. And a lot of that, I've read a number of blogs, and then eventually someone said, why don't you put this into a book? So we started writing a few books, and I think that then gives the credibility to get you on stage, which then gets you presenting about a topic. You naturally get all the questions asked of you, which then makes you think even harder. And it's a virtuous cycle once you get started. So it's not just LinkedIn. I think it's LinkedIn, but also get out on the speaking circuit if you can. If you're a CIO of an organization, even easier than maybe the CIO of or a CEO of a technology company where it feels like you're trying to sell something. Everyone wants to hear what the CIO's view is on how they're managing change, how they're managing DevOps, how they're managing governance. What about center of excellence? So I think pick a topic that's close to home and that you care passionately about. And that makes it a lot easier for you to start to organize your thoughts around it and work with other people to come up with the ideas and then start writing.
That's fantastic. Just one more question for you. So what's one mindset shift you wish every CIO would make today about managing Salesforce?
I think they need to look at the total ownership cost of Salesforce. Okay, that's the licenses from Salesforce. It's whatever support you need from consultants. It's what you need to invest in your internal team, center of excellence, and all the training, but also the tooling that Salesforce doesn't give you, that isn't part of the platform. So I would say change intelligence, but also backup, DevOps, data quality. There are a number of applications that you need. I see people taking the approach, which is we bought a Ferrari and we spent virtually all our money on the Ferrari, but then hang on, I need to get fuel. Oh, a friend of mine's got a recipe for making fuel out of potatoes, and someone else said that they know how to maintain it for free. Far better you buy a Honda and then allocate the resources to people are allocating sufficient budget to everything it takes to manage Salesforce. They look at the license cost as the total cost, and that's a false economy.
I think that's a great analogy. And I actually used that car analogy before, which is you need to make sure that your tires are appropriate and they are being changed, but you also need to invest in the driver. And that's what I see the COE or the person who's actually in charge of Salesforce. They can be given the directions from the business who are sitting in the back seat. They can have the dashboard, the GPS to tell them where to go. But if you don't have anyone who is empowered to drive the vehicle, to make those decisions, to adjust based on what they see in front of them, the car will never go anywhere. Or if it does, it can hit things. And I feel like that is such an under-leveraged place where if you don't provide ownership for someone or a team to actually run and to drive the platform, drive the vehicle on a daily basis, you're never going to get the outcomes. And so whether that's a COE, whether that's a dedicated team, I think that is critical to the overall success. And by having the right tools, by having the right platforms to change intelligence, having the awareness and source of truth is really how success is achieved. Ian, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I'm very optimistic. Clearly, agents are driving a level of change inside Salesforce themselves, but also the clients. I'm optimistic. I'm seeing a lot more people now taking Salesforce seriously and what it takes to run Salesforce properly. I'm the 5% of people who've got a metadata dictionary. That number I will see that change very quickly over the next year. We're already seeing that in terms of just the number of companies like us who are out there, but also just the revenue growth that we're seeing and the level of interest. I think what's happened is that we've gone from this feels hard to AI and some other things have actually got people to value to a small amount of value relatively quickly. And that's got people started. I think when people were in the last 2 or 3 years, people have gone, I know I need to do this, but this feels hard. AI has now gone, no, I can do quite a lot of this for you. And now I've got a springboard to get going. And I think that's why we're seeing this inflection point. So I'm very optimistic about the future in terms of people getting better value from Salesforce. I think the ecosystem needs to think about how it retools itself in terms of that training, moving further, like the consultants, moving further up the food chain, stronger business analysis skills, stronger architecture skills. We're going through what feels like a quite painful change, but I think the other end of it will all come out in far better shape.
Ian, thank you so much for your insights, your perspective, and it's a pleasure speaking with you as always. And really look forward to hearing about your presentation in London tomorrow. Safe travels, and we'll speak with you again soon.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks, Mike.